Selection and assessment is an important area of occupational psychology, since it is an area where there's had a significant impact on the development of assessment for job selection. Khosrow and Ashworth, 2013. Since the 1990s, there has been substantial growth in psychological tests due to the development of new tests and revisions of earlier tests. Anastasia and Brina, 1997. The majority of employers are using online assessments in their hiring process as well as for development processes. Cute, 2016. A psychological test is a set of questions, problems or tasks designed to elicit responses for use in measuring the traits, capacities or achievements of an individual. Aiken, 1998. The diagnostic and predictive value of a psychological test depends on the degree to which it serves as an indicator of a relatively broad and significant area of behaviour. Anastasia and Urbina, 1997. The validity and reliability of such psychometric tests is important for employers to make better and less risky selection decisions, as well as predict which candidates will be strong performers. Cute, 2016. There are a multitude of assessment tools that employers use, such as assessment centres, SJTs, personality tests, and ability tests. Each tool has its own value in the selection process, as well as its advantages and disadvantages. The present essay will critically discuss the use of ability tests in job selection by taking an in-depth look into the properties of the test, describing the test, what it measures and how, its psychometric properties and advantages and disadvantages, and its validity and reliability. Cognitive ability tests measure the processes and products of intellect, such as memory, understanding, reason, and problem solving. Aiken, 1998. Often ability tests have been further classified into achievement tests, measures current knowledge, or aptitude tests, measures the capacity of learning knowledge or skill. However, this is an arbitrary distinction because all tests measure what a person has learned up to the time they take the test. Gatewood et al., 2016. They have been used in high-stakes contexts such as military and pilot selection, i.e. the ASVAB, as well as for medical school admission, the UK CAT. Cognitive ability tests measure several distinct abilities, such as memory, reasoning, numerical fluency, logical evaluation. Gatewood et al., 2016. There's a close association between the content of these tests and academic achievement, and a variety of scores can be obtained. Thus they can differ among themselves and are not interchangeable. Gatewood et al., 2016. One of the most popular ability tests is the Wonderlic Personnel Test, which is a 50-item multiple-choice test designed to measure the aptitude of prospective employees for learning and problem-solving in a range of occupations. The questions are arranged in order of ascending difficulty and shows a good reliability, 0.82 to 0.94. Questions include quantitative and verbal reasoning, proverb matching logic, and word definitions. Another ability test that is commonly used in the UK is the UK CAT, that aims to assess fluid intelligence and other attributes thought to be important in decision-making through a series of multiple-choice subtests. McManus et al., 2013. Most frequently used for medical program admissions, this test includes sections on verbal reasoning, decision-making, quantitative reasoning, abstract reasoning, and situational judgment questions. Ability tests are very advantageous in organisational selection that helps make the selection process easier and less costly. They are able to be administered in a standardised setting by anyone, can be completed in a short period of time, and results can be computed immediately. McManus et al., 2013. However, with the increased use of assessment, the cost increases as well, so there becomes a lack of management support and the perception that interview meets clients' needs. Yet those who don't use assessment find it difficult to understand the value it adds to the business. Cute, 2016. They have also been found to be valid predictors of job performance and training success, and are able to generalise across cultures, as Batua et al. In 2005 found, with it translating across from the UK to the US. Additionally, it is important that employers show that they are making objective, unbiased selection decisions. Although conflicts between test specialists sometimes resolve around technical or esoteric issues, the primary issue that has fueled the bitter public debate over IQ testing has been the fact that the average test scores for members of a number of minority groups tend to be lower than average test scores for whites. For example, the difference between the mean ability test score of white and black examinees is generally about the same size as the standard deviation of the test, i.e. the standardised mean difference on ability tests is often in the range of 0.85 to 1. White Hispanic differences in average scores are somewhat smaller, but still substantial. The difference in average test scores means that there will be relatively few black or Hispanic applicants who receive high test scores, and that black and Hispanic applicants will be overrepresented among those receiving low scores on the test. As a result, if tests are used as the sole method of making decisions, fewer members of these minority groups will be selected into schools, jobs and training programs than if decisions are made at random or if quotas are imposed. In very selective contexts, the use of these tests as the sole means for making decisions will effectively screen out most minority applicants. Murphy, 2002. Racial differences in cognitive ability test scores are known to be considerably larger than racial differences in measures of job performance. Hartrip, 1997, Waterman and Avolio, 1991. One implication is that personnel decisions made on the basis of cognitive ability tests will have an unduly large adverse effect on employment opportunities for members of several racial and ethnic minority groups. A workforce selected on the basis of actual performance would be less racially segregated than a workforce selected on the basis of cognitive ability tests. Unfortunately, at the point of making selection decisions, actual performance is unknown, and the best we can normally do is to rely on predictors with well-established records of validity and utility, and cognitive ability tests are an exemplar of this class of measure. One suggested means of reducing the adverse impact on certain groups through ability tests is to use multiple tests or assessment devices. DeCourt, 1999. It is clear that this strategy will rarely eliminate group differences. Ryan, 1998. If group differences are large on one test, such as a cognitive ability test, they must be at least as large and in the opposite direction on a second test to completely eliminate the effects of test bias. This is suggested by Barron and Miles in 2002 to occur when used in conjunction with personality tests, as these tests which do not create an adverse impact can help to mitigate some of the difference, though it is arguably bad practice to try and use one non-discriminatory test to outweigh a different discriminatory test, as discrimination is not likely to be equally flowing. Another suggestion for reducing test bias has been to change the testing method, e.g. change from written tests to individually administered oral tests. However, Schmidt in 1996 noted, most studies of this hypothesis tend to confound testing methods with test content. That is, the comparison of two different methods of assessment might yield different results because of differences in the way the test is administered and scored, differences in the content of the assessment devices in question, or some combination of the two. One of the first studies that directly compares differences in methods of test administration holding test content constant, Chan and Schmidt in 1998, obtained some interesting and encouraging results. They developed video-based versus paper and pencil versions of a situational judgment test, in which the content of the test was held constant. They showed that group differences were substantially smaller on the video-based version, and explained the difference in terms of a number of factors, including differences in reading comprehension and examinees' reactions to the different methods of testing. Casicco in 1991 suggested that rather than ranking individuals strictly in terms of their test scores, people with similar scores might be grouped together in a test score band. When criteria other than ability test scores are used to rank applicants within bands, it is possible to reduce adverse impact. Sackett and Wilk in 1994 reviewed a range of test score adjustment methods that might be used with cognitive and non-cognitive tests. Although it is clear that scores can be transformed in ways that reduce the adverse impact of cognitive ability tests, there are both logical and legal arguments against many methods of test score adjustment. Schmidt, 1991. Berry et al. In 2011 investigated racial and ethnic differences in the criterion-related validity of cognitive ability tests. They found there to be at least 4 categories of factors that could differentiatedly affect test and/or criterion scores of minority and majority subgroup test takers, thus causing criterion-related validity estimates to differ between subgroups. They are range restriction, psychometric characteristics of the tests, e.g. measurement or error bias, contextual influences such as stereotype threat, true differences between the subgroups, and the role cognitive ability plays in determining performance. The study is a meta-analysis that explores whether the evidence to date is or is not supportive of the existence of differential validity between 4 subgroups. The study found that validity consistently favours whites, almost regardless of the moderators examined. Meta-analyses have consistently reported systematic differences between white, black, and Hispanic test takers in the US, of magnitudes that would almost certainly lead to adverse impact against minority groups in employment testing. Ho et al. 2001. However, there has been some evidence that societal changes in opportunities for employment and education may have served to narrow the pervasive gap between black and whites. Dickens and Flynn, 2006. Woods et al. In 2011 examined black-white differences in cognitive ability test performance for a meta-analysis. Controlling for sampling effects, meta-analyses revealed a narrowing of difference in CAT performance. between blacks and whites over successive decades in the late 20th century, supporting a cultural development theory of ethnic group differences in test performance, most likely reflecting societal changes in equality of opportunity. It should be noted that Woods concludes that given the gap between blacks and whites is still larger than half the standard deviation in the most recent data, practitioners remain justified in exercising particular care and caution in the use of CATs for selection assessment. Coaching has an effect, albeit minimal, on test scores. The effect of practice retaking the test shows that scores increase between first and second time, and between second and third time. But this improvement in scores does not necessarily translate into improved job performance. Levens et al. In 2007 examined bias due to retesting on cognitive ability tests in selection settings. It was centered on the concept that ability tests attempt to assess general cognitive ability because of its robust power to predict important real-world criteria and relatively low costs accompanied with administration. In the study, Levens et al. In 2007 found psychometric bias, a statistical concept that refers to the systematic over- or underestimation of true scores in a population, Jensen 1980. They found this for both measurement bias and predictive bias in retest scores, which suggests that the scores based on the retest were, to some degree, reflecting something different than scores based on the initial assessment. Namely, that the relationship between the constructs and the observed scores differed between groups, as established through measurement bias, that this was different predictive and that there were different predictive validity coefficients for groups that differ on specific characteristic or traits. This influence for an unknown variable moderating the effects is called predictive bias. The study advised that practitioners should consider the potential implications of retesting, because retesting resulted in increases in the degree to which the test items assessed non-G test specific skills, e.g. memory, and a decrease in the G loadings of the items. Some evidence that coaching and test prep can lessen the gap between white and black test takers on a job knowledge test for promotion, Chingnuera et al. 2009. Shafran et al. In 2018 completed a meta-analysis on retest effects, which examined the size of retest effects and its determinants in a high number of cognitive ability tests for up to 4 test administrations. Strict inclusion and exclusion criteria are applied regarding study design, participant age and health status, and cognitive ability tests. An extensive literature search detected 174 samples from 122 studies, which resulted in 786 test outcomes and an overall sample size of 153,185. A comprehensive longitudinal multi-level meta-analysis revealed significant retest effects and no further score gains after the 3rd test administration. Moderator analyses for multiple retests indicated that cognitive ability, operation and content, equivalence of test forms, retest interval and participant age have a significant influence on the size of the retest effect. A validation study is necessary for each selection program being developed to ensure that the measure is adequately measuring what it is intended to. Gatewood et al. 2016. The average operational validity for cognitive ability tests ranges from 0.38 to 0.47 for overall job performance and from 0.54 to 0.62 for training success, Batua et al. 2005. Many studies have sought to determine whether the validity of an ability test is stable across a variety of occupations. Campbell in 1990 researched the development of a selection system for all entry-level positions for the US Army, which included 65 predictor tests on 4,000 people. They found that general cognitive ability was a good predictor of job task performance across all levels, 0.63 to 0.65. The data indicated that the general ability tests were valid selection instruments across a large variety of military jobs. Hunter in 1986 studied the validity of the General Aptitude Test Battery for 515 validation studies. They found that mental ability tests are valid for a great many jobs and increase in the predictability of job performance as the job becomes more complex. Additionally, for training success, mental ability tests are consistently very high. This could be explained that the cognitive ability is highly correlated with job knowledge, and job knowledge is highly correlated with job performance. Murphy in 2002 states that there are 3 conclusions that can be drawn from research on the correlations between measures of general cognitive ability and job performance. First, Ability measures are likely to be correlated with performance in virtually any job, in part because all jobs call for some learning, judgment, and active information processing. Second, the question of which abilities are influencing performance on which tests may not be crucially important, if your goal is to find valid and useful for predictors of performance. And third, all other things being equal, measures of cognitive ability are likely to be the most useful and valuable components of a personnel selection system. Shelton Sparfelt in 2016 investigated if non-G factors of cognitive ability tests aligned with specific academic achievements. This is because models of human intelligence posit a strong general factor, G, that is based on substantial positive correlations between cognitive ability test scores. Jensen, 1998. The study found that scholastic aptitude was closely related to intelligence on the general factor level, affirming the role of intelligence in college admission testing. The results suggested a pattern of alignment between specific strengths and specific weaknesses in cognitive test performance, with specific strengths and specific weaknesses in educational achievement. Reliability is a necessary characteristic of a selection test. It is the degree of dependability, consistency, or stability of scores on a measure used in selection research. Gatewood et al. 2016. High reliability means that the test can be expected to yield consistent scores for applicants, and the uncontrolled factors that might affect the score of applicants are minimized. Difficult tests tend to have low reliability due to guessing. Using large samples tends to yield better estimates of reliability. The various types of validity and reliability tests, e.g. test-retest, parallel forms, iterator, and internal consistency. It's important that researchers understand what form is appropriate for specific circumstances and inappropriate for others. For example, test-retest may not be appropriate administered in close succession due to memory effects. Protosky and Bobko in 2004 tested the reliability of two cognitive-based tests in the form of paper and pencil versus computer-based, as well as timed versus untimed. They found that time tests are much more problematic due to load time of screens, but the cognitive ability tests show reliability of 0.84. Ability tests that measure mechanical abilities show very good reliability. The Bennett Mechanical Comprehension Test is typically used for various groups, including industrial applicants, employees, and students. It focuses on spatial perception and took knowledge rather than manual dexterity. The reported reliability ranges from 0.81 to 0.93. This could be due to the nature of the test, that is more complex and knowledge-based versus logic and verbal reasoning. Indeed, Schmidt in 2002 suggested that the reliability of cognitive ability tests is in fact greater than ratings of job performance themselves. Bukakis and Schmidt in 1996 examined 3 measures of verbal ability and found them all to have high reliabilities between 0.85 and 0.92. Sackett et al. In 2001 meanwhile found that for the multi-state bar examination, the internal consistency reliability was a very high 0.91. A point from this study, though, about adverse impact is that the reliability of tests decrease when changes were made to try and reduce adverse impact.